Back-to-back F1 weekends after the summer break, and we make our way to the Temple of Speed, where we'll see a plentiful of upgrades from pretty much every single team. With the track being as specific as it is, there is plenty to go over from the front wing and rear wing department, but also a couple things I want to go over right before we get into the upgraded parts. As I stated in the previous video as well, the track itself is upgraded. Turn 1 has changed, it's a bit wider going into it to avoid crashes and hopefully help a little bit with overtakes. And a lot of the curbing has been reduced, so you can actually take some corners a little bit faster than you typically do. And the track has been resurfaced, so it's going to be a bit hotter initially, and actually building up throughout the weekend, the track will get faster and rubbered in a lot better, so times will get faster from practice 1 all the way down to the race. We also have Kimi Antonelli in the car this week for the FP1 session. He is also expected to sign. We still haven't heard too much about that. There were some rumors saying it was going to be out today, but it's still not out, so I'm not expecting it. But maybe sometime during the FP1 session, we'll actually find out if Kimi's in the car. It's pretty much a guarantee at this point. Another interesting thing to note is that Alpine's actual engine department will be protesting a strike over what's happening over at the engine factory about abandoning the Renault engine. Employees who will be in the stands this weekend will wear a protest t-shirt and a black armband. Also, team members who are in the paddock, if they wish, they will wear a black armband as a sign of protest. This is very interesting to note. We've heard about them going to Mercedes. I really wonder what's going to happen with this. And it's no shock to me considering what's been happening with the engine and how slow they've been pretty much since that Red Bull era. The Renault engine has not been great. No matter what team you put it with and no matter what car has that engine, it was always a bit slower than the Mercedes or Ferrari engines. And lastly, the safety car actually crashed in a couple of pre-test laps, which I found very interesting to say the least. But right before I get into the upgrades and all that, I wanted to thank you guys for support. We hit 60K. You guys are the best community that I can ask for, and genuinely makes my day reading everything and being able to reply to you guys as much as I do. Let's keep killing these goals. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe. It would mean the world to me. But let's get started with the rear wings as we usually do in Monza. The order is a bit different this weekend out, at least for how it's pictured from Albert, but we have Ferrari, McLaren, Aston Martin, and Alpine. And for the most part, all these wings are going to be pretty much super low downforce. The Ferrari here has the lowest and smallest lower plane, so they do have probably the lowest downforce out of the 4 teams here, with the exception of Alpine. Ferrari and Alpine are comparable, while in the meantime, McLaren has 2 rear wings. We're going to go over that. I also will cover a bit more of the Ferrari rear wing, but McLaren and Aston Martin are similar here. Aston did use this rear wing specifically in Belgium, but so did McLaren. McLaren used this also in Belgium, and they do have another one to test. I wonder if Aston brought anything here. They said there's no new parts, at least from Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso, so this is what I suspect will be their rear wing. They need it anyways for the tire degradation, and they've also been extremely fast anyways in top speed, so this should be a good track for them, but tire deg is still very important in a track like Monza. Next 4 teams to cover is Red Bull, Mercedes, RB, and Williams. With Red Bull, they're using the exact same rear wing they had in Belgium as well. We're going to see this be a continuous trend with teams that don't want to waste part of their cost cap on just a track like Monza. Monaco always gets it because it's very important and any team can kind of win there. Monza, it's not the same story. The Red Bull rear wing actually took out some chunks during the Belgium GP to be able to provide more of a low drag setup while they were in the race. I think if Max did start towards the top, he probably would have won the race, but that is also his special. He says that's his favorite track of all time in Formula 1. Now, as for Mercedes, obviously they pretty much had a 1-2 except for the disqualification, so that rear wing was doing exactly what it needed to be doing in that GP. There's a lot of talks about the floor and how that's going to work with the car. It is giving more downforce, but at the same time, it seems like the balance is now going out the window. Car's on a knife's edge. You never really know what it's going to do. So hopefully they can get it figured out, because I really do suspect them to be, if not the second fastest team, as I stated in the previous video before. RB, we've seen this wing from them before, also in Belgium. Super low downforce. They're going to be running it here again. They need it. They've not been great in straight line speed. Hopefully they actually have a decent GP. And as for Williams, we can see the upgraded side pod inlet, but also that rear wing is very similar to Belgium. I can't actually tell from this angle if it's the same or not. The very low downforce rear wing here is the RB one. Everybody else pretty much has a low one. There's still somewhat downforce in the rear part of the car. Maybe they want a better DRS efficiency, because the bigger your upper and lower plane is, the more DRS you actually effectively get. In Monza, that's usually not a thing because you need it for the race. You're not always going to be in a DRS train. But Red Bull has used that tactic plentiful, and they've been able to save their tires a lot better. So let's see if teams kind of adapt towards that. Williams really isn't in the super low downforce that they typically are in. And then I do have a picture of Sauber's rear wing, super low, pretty much like the Alpine and the Ferrari. Flat, super small lower plane, really relying on that straight line speed to get them through this GP if they can. They say it should be better than Zandvoort, and I really hope it is, because they were very poor there. And that track pretty much exposed every weakness they have. Hopefully we can see a much more rejuvenated Stake F1 team here. Before getting into the front wings, here's a better picture of the McLaren rear wing, and as I stated, this is the one from Belgium, but the new upgraded one for Monza is also here. I'm assuming that Lando will probably run this one, which is the Monza upgraded wing, while Oscar will run the higher downforce. Maybe they switch then going into FP2, seeing what's the more optimal wing, because it might actually be better to use a wing with a bit more downforce, as I stated before, through strategy and being able to save and conserve your tires. The one in Belgium has a bigger lower plane for a little bit more of that rear grip, while this one is more executed on straight line speed. It's pretty much straightened out from corner to corner. But as we're done with the rear wings, we can talk about the front wings, and McLaren have not brought a lower downforce front wing, while a lot of other teams have, and we'll go over that as well. They still have their exact same front wing. Even Christian Horner was being talked about, Mercedes and McLaren, how their front wings are completely different. So the way that they generate their downforce is different than what Red Bull is doing, and he thinks that's where a lot of the problem relies. Well, Christian isn't an engineer, but he is correct on the front wings being different. But I don't think that solidly tells us what's happening with Red Bull and why their car is doing what it's doing. I also suspect Red Bull to change between both front wings. They have a couple of different variations. Nothing's yet pictured on the team and what type of setup they have. We know they're going to have their high shoulders. We know it's going to be a low downforce setup, and we've already seen their rear wing. So I expect the front wing to also be something they've already used in the season. It is expected to be old and current parts on the car to try and mix in a good balance for Max and Checo. Sauber has also brought a new front wing to this GP. It is a bit interesting looking. This should be their lower downforce setup. Whenever I look at the Sauber, I always think there's so many more elements than any other team, but there is 4. It's just the way that they divide it up and how they've done these elements. Because if you actually look at the front wing they typically use, this is a bit higher on downforce. They do have both of them, so let's see what they end up actually using in the GP. The new front wing that Ferrari has brought has now been shown to us as well. Very similar to that of Red Bull, Aston Martin, a lot of teams that are running that to where it starts off higher at the nose, and as it makes its way to the front wing plates, it goes a bit lower. And this is their lower downforce setup, much more straight line than it was in Belgium. Here's a comparison of those two, and you can see the little differences that they've made for Monza. They always make their car as suitable as possible for Monza because this is their home Grand Prix and where most fans show up to see Ferrari. You also have a comparison pic of the Ferrari wing from 2023 to 2024. You can see the variations they've made. They still have that same type of corner like style like they did it in 2023, which they have changed on their 2024 car typically throughout the GPs, but for Monza, they've gone back to this style. And as you can see, they only have one activator actually holding up the rear wing before they had 2. And here's also a picture of the 3 of them. As I stated before, those rear corners on the rear wing are typically more straight lined than they are circular here. And you can see how small that lower plane is, pretty much comparable to that of the 2023 car. We also get a good look at Aston Martin's front wing. It is a bit lower downforce than it is typically. It's just a bit more straight lined than your typical upper flaps kind of curving into the car. But as I said, this is a team to look out for. If they can nail the setup, they could be very deadly here. Alpine has yet again introduced those small cutouts in their front wing. We haven't really seen this throughout the season, but in 2023, it was a very common thing for Alpine to mess around with the front wing and see what was more optimal for the GP. Last team's front wing we have seen so far is Haas, and as you can see, there's two different ones. The top one is the lower downforce spec, and the bottom one is a bit higher downforce. They're also a team with a lot of straight line speed, and I think that's mainly to go through the floor being very simple. But let's see what they choose to do. The top one that is that lower downforce spec does have the nose all the way to the bottom. It was a upgrade introduced in Zandvoort, but it wasn't used because Nico actually ended up going into the wall with the front wing spec that they brought. So let's see if it gives them better performance. If it really does give them those extra few tenths, Haas will be the favorite out of those mid teams to get into the points, a P9 and a P10. Now going over the big Ferrari floor upgrade, as we all suspected, and as you can see, here are the changes from a old to new, but there are even better pictures that I want to go over for this floor. With these close-up pics of the old and the new, you can see how the Venturi tunnels have changed. You can see how the Venturi tunnels have changed towards the end, a bit bulkier than they were on the previous car. And that goes in unison now with this new floor edge, which has changed its angle. And as you can see, the connectors are bigger than they were before, which also means that rear part of the floor, that rear wing on the floor edge, has changed pretty significantly. Coming off of the floor edge, you can see that little cutout they've added to it. But also, my assumption as to why these connectors are bigger is to control that bouncing that they've typically had through fast speed corners, and to just give it that little bit of load that it needed to control the downforce, but also still be super strong in all of the corners like it's typically been. This is a permanent upgrade and not just something from Monza. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please give it a like and subscribe. It would mean the world, and peace.